Okay, now that we've discussed what's meant by efficiency and what's meant by allocative and technical efficiency, we're now going to look at the last two types of efficiency, which is dynamic and intertemporal efficiency. And we're also going to look at how the government and workplaces can help to improve their dynamic efficiency. So the first one is intertemporal efficiency. And intertemporal efficiency is all about providing a balance between using resources today and to satisfy our wants and needs, but also conserving resources for the future. So generally when we talk about intertemporal efficiency, we're referring to the environment, so making sure that we're not using up all our land resources today and therefore causing problems for future generations. Things like climate change fall under the under the banner of intertemporal efficiency. So ensuring that we're not using up all our resources, creating problems for the future because of excess carbon emissions, which can hurt the living standards of future generations because of rises in sea level. All of these things are related to intertemporal efficiency. Okay, so it's about trying to preserve the earth to facilitate growth in the future. And it's also about providing an ideal mix between investment and consumption. So what I mean by that is we're not consuming too much today, we're not using up all our savings, we're not going into lots of debt, so that we have money available for future investment. So be careful when you use the term intertemporal efficiency, don't just go straight to the environment. Also think about the balance between making sure that we have enough money left for investment in the future, that we have savings, that we so that we can fuel our economy and boost our productivity in the long term, because we have money to spend on infrastructure and ways to improve technology. So just that's the key thing with intertemporal efficiency. Always think about it as a balance between investment and consumption as well. So some things that can improve technical efficiency, so let's say we develop better methods for getting minerals out of the ground, that might help our technical efficiency, we'll become more productive, but it might hurt our intertemporal efficiency because we may run out of resources in the future. And then we have dynamic efficiency, and dynamic efficiency is probably the hardest to get your head around, but it is achieved when businesses can quickly respond to changes in market conditions. So it's all about how quickly producers can shift resources into areas that are in demand based on changes in consumer sovereignty or what society wants. So if consumer sovereignty dictates that something is in high demand, how quickly can we allocate resources to that area? How quickly can we get land, labour and capital resources to ensure that we're making that good or service? And if we don't achieve dynamic efficiency, if we can't quickly shift resources into areas that are in high demand, then we can't achieve allocative efficiency quick enough. So it may take us 3 or 4 years before we can get the optimal allocation of resources if we're not dynamically efficient. So dynamic efficiency is critical. It's critical that land, labour and capital are able to quickly respond to changes in market conditions, changes in consumer sovereignty, changes in consumers' tastes and preferences. Okay, so another definition of dynamic efficiency, and this is the best definition, how quickly a society can move from a suboptimal allocation to an optimal allocation of resources in response to changed conditions or incentives. So a good example of that is there's a preference now for developing wind energy to preserve the environment, to prevent climate change. So it's about how quickly Australia as a nation can develop the infrastructure, develop the technology to ensure that we can create wind energy for the future. How quickly we can develop in response to technological advances to take advantage of these new opportunities so that we can meet society's demands. So representing dynamic efficiency on the PPF, here's just a simple example. Let's say that an economy was producing grain or wine and they valued both goods and services equally. So, one unit of output was the same regardless. Well, where would be the most allocatively efficient point? Well, initially we'd be at about this point here, because that's, if we plus the two of them together, that would be about 11 plus 11, that's 22. That's approximately the most value that we're going to get. It's much higher than just 15 if we produce all wine, or 15 if we produce all grain. But then suddenly we start to value wine more than we value grain. So dynamic efficiency would be about how quickly we can move along the PPF to a point that is now more allocatively efficient based on the fact that we now value wine higher than grain. And that would be about point D, because now we're valuing wine twice as much, we want to produce more of that. It's still not dynamically efficient point here, because the opportunity cost is so high at the end of our graph, so we're still better off being at a point on the PPF, but it is at a different point now. And dynamic efficiency is how quickly we can get from point C to point D, based on changes in consumer preferences. How can we boost dynamic efficiency? Well, here are some key ways that we can boost dynamic efficiency, or the government can boost dynamic efficiency and businesses. One thing is what we call deregulating the labour market, and we'll look at that more later in the year. But if we can pay people based on profits rather than agreed or wages set by the government, then if people know that they're going to get paid more if they're making higher profits, then they're going to be willing to shift their labour resources into areas that are in higher demand. So, for example, the mining industry in recent time. If we remove unfair dismissal laws, so if the government make it easier to sack employees, if we're working in an industry that's now become less profitable, less in demand, we can quickly get rid of resources, we can quickly sack people so that they can be moved into areas where we have more demand in this case. So, for example, that would be very relevant in the manufacturing industry at the moment. There's very little demand for manufactured items in Australia, so it would be dynamically efficient to quickly sack workers and move them on into areas where we're having higher demand for where there's higher demand for Australian products. If we have unfair dismissal laws, it can take a long time to sack people. Other ways, developing multi-skilled employees, so ensuring that our employees have a range of talents and therefore they are suited to a range of different industries, so that if demand for one product increases, they can quickly shift and work in another industry or work in a different way to ensure that we're producing what consumers are demanding. And removing subsidies in particular industries. And what I mean by that is, in some industries are protected by the government and they give them cash handouts so that they can continue to supply. But if these are in industries where we're not competitive, then we're better off shifting our resources to other areas. So again, the government used to give very high subsidies to our car manufacturers, to our textile industries to protect them. But we're better off shifting our resources to other areas because we're not competitive in these industries. It's not allocatively efficient for us to be providing these goods and services. So we're better off removing the subsidy, and therefore we will shift resources to areas where we are more efficient. I want you to have a go at these 3 questions.